Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you to raise the bar on your own performance and to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's episode.
Greetings, this is Hugh Ballou. Welcome to this episode number 300 of the Nonprofit Exchange. 8 years of talking with leaders with great wisdom and experience in many fields. Our leader today is Stu Manewith. We're going to talk about data and why it's important. So Stu, let's start out by talking about who you are and why are you doing this great work?
It's funny, none of us, I think, when they are 30 plus years into their career, as you and I both are, look back and think when we were in our 20s, what we'd be doing now. You'll be interested to know that my background actually is in arts administration. When I got out of school, I styled myself to be a producer of theater. And in fact, I worked at a theater for the first 4 or 5 years of my career, but it was a nonprofit theater and I was mentored by a wonderful director of development. She's since passed away, but I learned from her about fundraising and about that fundraising can be a very rewarding profession. And so I learned from her and I raised money you produced children's theater for the first 4 or 5 years of my career, but I learned that you needed to fundraise in order to produce the plays. And from there, I went on to a career in fundraising. I worked for a membership organization, a fraternal organization for about 6-7 years. And then I was director of annual giving at a healthcare foundation. And that's where I really cut my teeth on learning fundraising because annual giving so often depends on leveraging data and using data. I got to be very comfortable and familiar with data. And I was there for about 7 years. And then some people like to joke and say that I went over to the dark side, but I really went over to the technology side. I went to work for a company called Blackbaud. I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with Blackbaud, the Razor's Edge being probably their main fundraising CRM product. And then about 6 years ago, so I was there for about 13 years working on with organizations, including, frankly, a lot of faith-based organizations were part of my patch, implementing their nonprofit fundraising and accounting systems. And then about 6 years ago, I went to work for Omatic Software, which is where I work now, which is a data integration company that is focused exclusively on integrating data for organizations in the nonprofit sector.
Great. We're streaming this live on Facebook. You can find us at thenonprofitexchange.org. Stu represents Omatic, OMATIC software.com, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But Stu, I've been working in the sector for 33 years now, and I find a large gap in the way organizations, churches, nonprofits, community-based groups, associations a little better because they have to stay in touch, but there's a stewardship piece that goes with managing our data, because we have people that give us money, they give us their time, they give us their intellectual property because they have a passion about what we do, our purpose, our mission, and we're in the business of transforming lives. So what's the biggest challenge for those of us that are really way too busy in understanding what we need to know about managing data? The data are people's names, all the stuff about them. How do we build and maintain those relationships using data? So talk about the importance of it and what kind of data are we talking about?
Sure, thanks, Stu. That's a great lead in. I would say, first of all, the thing that people need to think about, and it's not easy if you're not used to it, but I would say let's get in the practice of it, is that organizations need to think about their data as an asset like any other asset, like money in the bank, like investments, like cars and houses, and anything else that you think of as an asset. Data is an asset. It has tremendous value. It has tremendous worth. And because of that, it should be taken care of and stewarded and fed and cleaned and just taken care of the same way that you would take care of and steward any other asset that is going to be valuable to you. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. If you had a car, you'd get the oil change, you'd fill it full of gas, right?
Right. And
You
if you
might
have
wash it. You might wash it occasionally.
and if you have data, if you've got a database, you want to make sure that it's clean. You might, for example, you might send the data out to make sure that all of your zip codes are up to date, or that you can have dates of birth or information about maybe who has passed away so that you can mark them as deceased. But so things like that, I guess, align with getting your car maintained and getting your car washed. But I would even go back to, just if you think about just the basics, making sure that people's names are spelled correctly, that you've got the right address for them, that if they change their email address, or if they prefer certain correspondence to go to a work email address, another correspondence to go to a home email address, you have that information tracked and identified so that you're communicating to people the way they expect to be communicated with, and you're not, again, smelling their name wrong, or referring to a married couple appropriately, or if someone, God forbid, gets divorced and a name change goes back, people want to be referred to the way they want to be referred to. And I would say just those basics are a great start.
I get emails that are requesting a donation and people spell my name wrong.
Yeah.
And that doesn't say they care very much about the relationship. Now, you were in fundraising and you acquired the CFRE title. Tell people what that is and what you learned about relationship building in that process that's so important that data helps support.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. So I earned my CFRE in 1999, so I guess that's 23 years ago. It stands for Certified Fundraising Executive, and what it means is someone who has earned that designation. I'll just take a minute and tell you about the process. Has achieved a base, what the fundraising profession considers to be a baseline level of subject matter and domain expertise in order to be an effective fundraiser. And the process is you have to have 5 years of experience as a fundraiser, demonstrate that you have what is called professional practice, means that either you've raised X amount of dollars over those 5 years, or you've managed a fundraising team, or you've built a communications program, or something that supports and extends and enhances the development and philanthropy. And then you sit for an exam. It's a 200 question exam that you have to pass at a certain level. What I learned from that process and from being a fundraiser and then from working with data systems that support fundraising is you can't underestimate the importance of relationships and relationship building, and that people, supporters, whether they are people who register for an event, sign up to attend a class, subscribe to a newsletter, all of those things work together. All of those different ways they touch an organization work together to form a picture of a person or a couple or a household. And a fundraiser or a development professional, donor relations professional, it behooves them to use all of that data in how they interact and how they communicate with those people to build that relationship. And sometimes that relationship is going to be an email or an online, a virtual relationship. For major gift officers like my wife, who's a major gift officer for a hospital, it's very much in person. But at all levels of the fundraising pyramid, we talk about the bottom of the pyramid, which is the I call it the low cost, high volume donors, versus the top, which is the major donors or people who have you in their will. Regardless, you've got to know whom you're talking to, and you have to have the data. There's so much data. You have to have data in your systems that you can use when you're establishing those relationships and when you are cultivating and soliciting and stewarding those relationships.
I remember watching the movie, I think it was Alan Arkin or Alan Alda, that was a politician, Tynan or something, Joe Tynan, and he's on a call with a constituent, and his assistants there pulling through the card file was through the he says, how Joe, how's Sally and the kids? Just
Exactly right. Exactly right.
had in front of him. And I know I watch NASCAR races. I know they have some sort of database. They can give all the history of this driver and what's going on and, you know, the statistics. They just rattle them off like it's in their brain. But, you know, on the other side of that, when somebody remembers my birthday or remembers something I did significant, that's important. So you talked about, we do different things. So we have a portal where we have donations, and that comes into a donation database.
Right.
We have an email database. We have a mailing database. We have hopefully a segmented database. So we have planned giving, we have major gifts, we have small monthly gifts, we have people
Right.
segmented differently. It's a mess.
It's a mess. We also have, I mean, I'd say you're going a little deeper than scratching the surface, but organizations will also have event management. They'll have an events database. They will have volunteers. Very often, congregations will have a separate membership database, separate from fundraising. I would say it can be a mess. And I would say that savvy data management professionals realize the importance of amalgamating and consolidating all of that data into a single, we call it a system of record, a big boy system, a big boy CRM, so that they can see all those touch points. And when someone calls in, or when you call out to somebody, or when you even do direct marketing segmentation, you can pull in as much personalization as possible, because personalization is the name of the game today. And to your point, Hugh, that's what makes readers or listeners, or the person on the other end of the phone or the other end of the email, it resonates with them that you know who they are, that you care about them, and that they're important to you, and that your gift ergo is important to them.
Occasionally I get an email. I hope it's not from myself, but I'll, those fields that bring in your first name or last name,
Right.
What to specify. And I'll get one, dear name. And I went, they weren't very careful. They didn't put my name in that data field so that it brought it up when they sent me this personalized message. So
well, it's a red flag. It's a red flag that there was something, someone was not taking care. We work with a lot of organizations where these days there are so many people who are typing their own information into forms, and they do it in all lowercase or all uppercase, or in the city field they'll put NYC instead of New York City, or the Big Apple if they're trying to be funny. But that kind of thing can come back and bite an organization and the donor themselves on the backside, because when you get a direct mail letter or even an email, just the way you said, where it says "Dear Stu" and Stu is all lowercase, I'm thinking, what the heck? What's going on here? Obviously, they should know enough to capitalize the first letter in my name, and that makes a difference to people.
It does. It does. It's all in that. It's really. We teach in SynerVision that the foundation of leadership is relationship. The foundation of communications is relationship. The foundation in fundraising is relationship. So we can blow it really easily. It takes you a long time to build up, but you can blow it quickly. So I've been working with nonprofit leaders and clergy for 33 years, and there's some consistent patterns. We hear this word nonprofit and it pivots us into this scarcity thinking. We can't spend money on that. We can't do that. It's the we can't thing because we're a nonprofit. So one of the ways that we think in scarcity terms, our specialty is helping groups become fundable. And if you've got a plan that talks about specific outcomes, if you've got a plan, then the board and the volunteers know what to do. So that having the business plan and your strategy accompanying that is so essential. And I get things like, oh, we don't have time to do that. We have to feed people. Oh, we don't have time to do that. We're saving people's souls. But wait a minute, you're compromising the work that you're called to do. So when people look at data, in this probably the same way as planning, there's probably lots of people that have partial data, but it's not clean, it's not concise, it's not usable. So
Right.
how do you address the mindset, oh, we're doing important work, we don't have time for that?
That's such a great question. It's so interesting because we've at Omatic, we've studied that. And in fact, we did a study on that last year. We assumed that the outcomes that we were gonna get, and it panned out. But what we observed is that if you have good technology and data management tools, that will directly and positively affect the ability you have to deliver your mission, to feed more people, to save more souls, to build more houses, whatever. And I'll get into the detail in just a moment. And if you don't have good tools and technology, or if you rely on manual labor-intensive processes, or if you don't have any technology at all, or rudimentary, or if you don't put the energy into taking care of your data, then you're going to have less resources to deliver whatever your mission is. And I'll walk you and I'll take a moment and walk through the cycle with you. And I'd love you to ask questions about it. So when your technology and your tools ensure that your data are of high quality, current, fresh, clean, error-free, complete, comprehensive, amalgamating all those data points, then the processes that use that data are going to be more effective. You'll be able to personalize the way that donors and supporters expect you to. You'll be able to engage your constituency in a more effective way, which will lead to a all in all better constituent experience. Again, proper personalization, expectations being met by that community of people that you're engaging with, with whom you're building the relationships. That will result in them being retained as donors, or being acquired as donors, or raising the size of their gift at a higher than average rate, which will mean more money to fund your mission. And I know that in many organizations, there are some that may feel that it's crass or not in good conscience to talk about money, but the truth is that it takes money to run our organizations. And if we can use technology to make sure that our data is of high quality, and we can use that data to better engage our constituencies, we will in fact increase donor retention, increase average gift, and have more funding to save more souls, build more houses, feed more people, buy more basketballs for the kids who can't afford them, all those kind of things. The flip side of that is that if you don't take care of the quality of your data, and the processes that leverage that data will not hit the mark, they'll miss the mark. You will turn off donors, just like the example you gave a moment ago, and they will not be as retained or not be as acquired, and you will not meet your fundraising targets, which means there'll be less money to deliver your mission. So that's how we kind of look at the cycle of how data tools and data management really directly impact how successful an organization can be in delivering its mission.
Wow. So there's putting all these moving parts together. So one question that comes to my mind is about staffing. Now, very often, if you're a visionary or a people person, you're not a tactical person, and part of being tactical is data, technology, right, that whole realm. And so some of us that are the visionary leaders shy away from all of that. Now, I happen to be very comfortable with technology, but I'm not common. So what would you say to a person like that? And we tend to want to, oh, it's a nonprofit, let's get some college kid to do this for us. You really need somebody with a higher level expertise that can actually, it's an investment for you. That's actually going to deliver much more in results than you're paying them. So how do we rethink about whose area of expertise do we delegate? Delegate is a leadership quality we know little about, but we need to delegate this piece to somebody who's going to manage the fullness of it. So what advice do you have about staffing it?
Sure. Again, great question. In this day and age, we're already in the second fifth of the 21st century. In this day and age, every organization has a database. I mean, I know that for many that may be an Excel spreadsheet, but for most, they have a database, and there should be somebody identified as being the owner of that database. And I think it really does fall to them. And those people, when I was in the theater, my very first job, and I think this is often true in faith-based organizations and any organization, and that is people who, when I was in the theater, people who were theater majors found themselves, being the accountants and writing the purchase orders and making the phone calls and doing the business things that they never really anticipated doing. And I think I find that true among clergy and among other social workers who went into the field to deliver the mission, and they find themselves running the organization. So, and whether someone has come into it that direction or these days, of course, there are nonprofit administration programs. People can major in nonprofit management, but either way, there really does need to be somebody who owns his ownership of the database. Now, that doesn't mean they need to be technically proficient. Luckily, these days also, there are many software applications that don't require knowledge of coding, don't require knowledge of programming languages, that people can use to amalgamate this data and allow them to obtain insights from it in a way that probably 10, 20 years ago required more of a technology specialist. I think that there are software options, and I don't want to call too much attention to Omatic software, but that's one of the things that we do, is that we provide utilities and technology tools for organizations to integrate data where you don't need to be a programmer or a coder. All you need to be is an end user, and we give users the opportunity to take advantage of data in ways that they might not have been able to do.
Well, I didn't know such a tool exists. So it's OMATIC, and the website is OMATIC software.com. So when I've got a picture, if those of you on the audio podcast won't see it, of course, but you can go to this episode and see the video, which would show you this. And we're about 23 minutes into the interview. But what do you provide for people? It just seems like a nightmare of all these different pieces. So what does Omatic bring to the table that would be helpful?
Thank you for asking. What we bring to the table is a tool set that allows organizations to take data from disparate sources, like in the diagram, you can see all of those sources around the perimeter of the circle: email applications, email marketing applications, online giving applications, event management applications, peer-to-peer fundraising, all of those different payment systems, and bring them in to your main database so that the people who are easily map the data, which means identify the source and the right destination, and so that organizations can have all of these different data points from all of the different systems they use all in one place, and they can use that data effectively to continue to communicate and build relationships with their constituency.
Great. And you know this quite well, and that's pretty obvious. So what are the trends happening? I mean, we see new programs practically every day. So what are the trends that you see going on in the nonprofit technology landscape?
Well, there's two that I see, and they're somewhat related, but let's talk about them separately. One is, of course, the advent and the movement to the cloud. More organizations are migrating to tools that are cloud-based, or building. They may have an on-premises main database, but they are using more and more cloud apps. Even basic office applications like Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word. These days, if you get it, it's Microsoft Office 365, and it's all cloud-based. You don't have to worry about having anything on your own computer or on local servers. It's all cloud-based. Cloud technology is not just newfangled, but it is in the long run less expensive, because the organization who's using it is less concerned about infrastructure on their own premises, and the cloud provider is more often responsible for the hardware and the servers and even the software, and all you need is internet connection, and you are off to the races. The other thing is that it's safer, because cloud providers have to be completely up to speed and up to date on security and on data protection. And it is it's, as we know from having been through the last 2 years of the pandemic, it allows people to work from wherever they need to, and they don't need to go into an office anymore to be productive and effective. So cloud technology is one. What that has done is, to a great extent, the second trend is the ability to use all of these different apps and platforms and programs to reach out to different constituents and supporters and donors and members in different ways, whether it is online giving or text to give or email marketing, email journeys. There are different apps and different platforms and systems that organizations can now obtain, and that's the trend I'm seeing, is that they are obtaining them, that allows them to meet their supporters where the supporters want to be met. But what it also does is, to the point we were making before, is it furnishes them with a lot more systems and a lot more data that they need to manage, and it can be overwhelming, and it gives them more data to work with, but also more data to manage.
Your title that you gave me was from data and technology to mission impact, : is it a virtuous cycle?
A virtuous cycle, yeah, a virtuous cycle.
Say more about that, please.
So a virtuous cycle is any cycle that where there's some dependencies, excuse me, where there are some dependencies, where one component of the cycle leads to the next and leads to the next, and it circles around to the initial one. I'm not being very articulate, but I wrote a note down. So let me read that note to you. It's a chain of activities in which each activity reinforces the subsequent activity for a positive result or outcome that ultimately supports a loop back to the initial activity in the cycle, so that the cycle continues with further positive momentum. In fundraising, we hear talk of something called moves management. That's a great example of a virtuous cycle. Cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship leads around the cycle back to cultivation. And the cycle that I was talking about, from starting with an investment in tools and technology and cycling around to quality data, better processes, better engagement, more money for mission impact, is a virtuous cycle. It will continue around and around until something disrupts it.
Mostly it's us disrupting it. Yeah. So Stu, this is very enlightening. And, we have all of this at our fingertips. And so I would hope that people would look at this sector more closely, and then reach out. We do have volunteers that could be helpful here, but then it would pay us to even have a part-time staff person to help oversee all of the data and how it's applied, and making sure that the people on the board understand the data as well. So this works both ways. It's an outreach for data, but also it's an information system for us. So this is really good. Hadn't heard about this, been in the field a long time. So you reached out and we connected, and I'm thanking you for being here today. So
It was my pleasure.
I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want to leave people with? A question, a challenge? What do you want to leave them with?
So I would say, I guess my challenge is try to look at your data as an asset. Try to look at all of the ways that you can get insights from consolidating data from different points and the stories they tell about the donors or the supporters or the congregants or the members that you're working with, and how you can use data to build a relationship with them and have them build that relationship back with you. And hopefully, and again, at the risk of sounding too crass or mercenary, getting them to invest in your cause so that you can do good with the resources that building that relationship provides.
Absolutely good. So folks, you can find it at, I'm going to read your website one more time. It's Omatic, OMATIC software.com. Stu Manewith, thank you for being our guest today on the Nonprofit Exchange.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching the Nonprofit Exchange.